Hey, I'm Mr. Coker, and I'm going to go over how to add and subtract polynomials. To begin with, I'm going to write this problem out. Let's say we have 5x to the fourth plus 3x squared plus, I'll call it 7x to the fourth minus x squared. Okay, so here we have two polynomials. I want you to start by saying a polynomial is a group of more than one term. Poly means many, and nomial means number, but it applies just to terms when we're talking about math, about algebra. So you notice we have two sets of parentheses and a plus sign in between it. Okay? Two sets of parentheses with two terms in each one. That would be called a binomial because it has two. Another binomial because it has two more. We're going to add those together, and adding polynomials is super easy because all we're going to do is combine like terms. When you're adding polynomials, the first thing I'm going to do, just for visual purposes, is get rid of the parentheses. And the reason is we don't need them. They don't really have any use when we're adding. So now I'm just going to find like terms. So remember, a like term has the same variable with the same exponent. So here, 5x to the fourth plus 7x to the fourth, those are like terms. I can add those together. 3x to the second, or 3x squared, minus x squared is another one. That's another pair of like terms. I'm going to put the parentheses back here. You don't need to do this. I'm just doing this for visual sake. If you look at this now, this is going to tell us the number of x to the fourths. We of course add the coefficients together. 5 plus 7 equals 12. That is our number of x to the fourths. And then on this side, we have x to the seconds, or x squared, they mean the same thing. And we have 3x to the second minus x to the second. What goes in front? If we just have a variable with no number, what goes in front of it? It is a 1. So the coefficient is, I can put a 1, and we have 3 minus 1. That, of course, is 2. And we're done. That's your final answer. So that's adding polynomials. Now pause it if you need to write this down because I'm going to erase it. If I had fancy editing, I would just be like, and it would disappear and I'd have a subtraction problem. But I don't. I don't have fancy editing. I have a board and markers and a camera on my laptop. But that's okay. Okay. Now, subtracting. Subtracting is similar. It's very similar. It's just there's one difference when we're talking about subtracting and adding. When we're subtracting, the parentheses matter. Remember, I just said when we're adding parentheses, I erased them. I said they don't mean anything, they don't matter. When we're subtracting and also when we're multiplying, they do matter. Now I'm going to rewrite this problem. Okay? Now the first thing I'm going to do, see this polynomial, this parentheses, I'm going to rewrite it without the parentheses. You might be like, but Mr. Coker, you just said parentheses matter. Well, these parentheses don't matter. The next parentheses are going to matter, and that's because they have a minus sign. Minus sign means it matters. This is why. Anytime in algebra, when you see a set of parentheses and you see a term, whether it's a number or a variable out directly touching parentheses, it means that you multiply. And you might say, but this is a term, but it is. The minus sign, let's assume, okay, let's think of it this way. If we're doing adding polynomials, what number do I put? If I don't have a number, what number is it? It's 1 in front of a variable. Well, we can mentally think like there's a 1 here, okay? But if we're adding, well, what's 1 times anything? Itself. If I have a polynomial and I multiply by 1, I get that same polynomial. What if I multiply by -1? I don't get the same thing. That was a lot of talking to explain it. What I really want you guys to think about when you see this is, when you see a minus sign touching parentheses, you change the sign of everything inside parentheses. This is distributive property, which will be the next thing that we'll talk about. So what we're doing is distributing the negative sign. And that means we change signs. That's all we're going to do. Everything inside the parentheses, we're going to change its sign. Now, notice inside parentheses we have 4x to the second power, or 4x squared. Well, what's the opposite of 4x squared? The opposite, if I change its sign, minus 4x squared. This one is easy to see because we see a minus, then we see the 4x squared. It's easy to see that. Students usually will notice this one and change it. Oftentimes, they'll miss the next one. Remember, we have to change the sign of everything in parentheses. Notice this -2. We have a negative and a negative. Well, what's the opposite of negative? Of course, it's positive. So if I take the -2, I'm going to turn that into a +2. Now it's easy. Now all we're going to do is cover all of include the minus sign. Now we're going to combine like terms. Now I'm not going to write it out again because you know how to do that. I just did it in the previous example. I'm not going to write them together again. I'm just going to add. So 6x squared minus 4x squared. 6 minus 4 is 2. -7, now we're under constants. -7 plus 2, -5. And you're done. That is that. So when you're adding polynomials, essentially you're just combining like terms. That's all you're doing. When you're subtracting polynomials, you have one extra step, and that is anything following a negative sign, in the parentheses following the negative sign, you're going to change the sign, and then you'll combine like terms. And I don't care how many terms are in that parenthesis. This one we have 2 terms, and we changed this positive to a negative, and we changed this negative to a positive. I don't care if there are 2 terms, if there are 4 terms, if there are 100 terms. I'll never give you one with 100 terms, but you would change all the signs, because that's how the distributive property works. The next lesson, next week, we'll talk about the distributive property on Monday. Okay, so that's the video. Thanks for watching.